Hello, David Clark here from DVC Training, and I'm going to do a video about setting up Edius 11. There are two ways of getting at the Edius setup files. One is to use the link that comes in the email that you are sent when you order Edius, which gets you a downloader from edius.net. Now the file it downloads is only a couple of hundred megabytes, because what it is a setup program which will then go through your system and install absolutely everything for you. This is probably the easiest way of setting up Edius. It takes a little bit of time because it's got to put on Edius and VizTitle and all the other bits and pieces. When I timed it on a system, it was roughly half an hour. But the good thing is you can set it going and then just let it get on with it and come back when it's finished. The second way of doing it is to download all the installers separately. So with Edius, you have the main Edius program. You've got the DVD writing templates if you want them. You've also got VizTitle, Acon, and some stuff from Vitascene. So there are about 4 or 5 different installers you can get. So I'll look at doing both. First thing I'm going to do is talk you through using the edius.net installer. So you download the file, you then unzip it and then run the installer. Pops up with this box. First thing it's going to do is check if it's using the latest version of the installer. If it hasn't, it'll update that, which means it'll download an update, install the update, and then carry on. Whilst it's installing an update for the program, you might think nothing has happened. It did hang around for about a minute or so before it popped up again, but it is, just let it get on with it. Then what it'll do is look at your system, check that it's okay to run Edius, and then give you a list of all the different things that it needs to install to put Edius 11 on your system. Now, if you've got a Black Magic device on there, this will prompt you to put on the drivers that are recommended by Grass Valley. The ones that we're using at the time that I'm making this video are 12.4.2, and they have brought out later drivers, which I have personally used and they've been okay. But obviously, if you want the ones that are recommended by Grass Valley, which they have thoroughly tested, then go with whatever this decides to put on there. What you do next is you just press the start button and it gets on with it. Downloads Edius and installs it, and then installs VizTitle and all the other extras. And I say it takes a bit of time to do it, so just let it get on with it. So just speed up this section and get to the end. At the very end it says, right, everything's installed, but you are going to need to get a serial number for VizTitle. So your email from Edius will have included a serial number for Edius, but not a serial number for VizTitle. So basically follow this link to go to the page on the edius.net website where you can claim your VizTitle serial. Obviously you don't need to do this if you're not going to stick VizTitle on there, but I'd recommend you do it anyway because sometime in the future you might want it, so why not get hold of it. When you get to this page, what you end up doing is you just enter in your Edius 11 number and press a button, and then it'll pop up with a new serial number, which is your VizTitle number. Copy that somewhere. What I tend to do for everything is to make up a little notepad file somewhere which has all my serial numbers in it, but copy that serial number somewhere. After you've got the serial number, it prompts you to activate VizTitle. You don't have to do it right now because so far you haven't even activated Edius, but you might as well just press this button here and activate VizTitle. So you press the button. It then brings up the activation screen, you put in your serial number and name and email, and click OK, and it activates. So far we've got everything installed. Still haven't opened Edius yet. Now the setup manager is just going to sit there and it's going to start every time you start up your computer, and it's going to tell you if there's any updates. Probably the simplest thing is just to let it do it. And then if there are any updates to Edius or all the extras, you'll get updated straight away. But if you don't like that, just pop into the task manager and go to Startup, find the Edius Setup Manager and just disable it. That way it doesn't run automatically when you run Windows. Now, so I probably wouldn't bother because it doesn't actually get in the way being there, and it will tell you if there are any updates. But if you don't like it, you can disable it, and you can then choose to run it whenever you feel like it. If you did install the Edius Setup Manager, then it will prompt you when there are updates, but sometimes you might find that programs themselves prompt you. So for example, let's go into Acon, the standalone version that comes with Edius. And if you look at this, it's prompting me to do an update already. So I just click on that and let it do it. So you might find that, for example, might prompt you for an update separately. Now the other alternative to using the Setup Manager is to download all the bits individually. If you're going to do that, then go to the Edius World website, which is run by Grass Valley, and look for Edius 11. Then go to this menu on the right hand side and click Support and go to Downloads. And here you can see links to download the files to install Edius 11 as well as Edius X. Obviously click on the Edius 11 one, and here you can see the installer for Edius Pro and Workgroup and a separate installer for Edius Broadcast. Now pretty much everybody that deals with me is going to be buying Edius Pro or Workgroup. Then you download it and run it, and that will install Edius for you. It only puts on Edius, it doesn't put on any of the extras. Now if you want to get the extras, the easiest thing to do is once you've actually got into Edius, you go up to the Help menu and you choose this heading, Download Bonus Contents. And this will take you to another page on the Edius World website where you can find the installers for Acon, Plus, VizTitle and Vitascene and download those separately. The only reason I go the Edius World route is just because you're having problems with the Edius install program. For whatever reason, things go wrong all the time. There might be something that's causing a problem. Well, if you can't get it, then go to Edius World and get the bits separately. Also, from the Help menu, you can choose to download the DVD menu templates if you buy the DVD add-on. Once you've installed Edius by either route, the next thing to do is activate it. What you have to do is double-click on Edius on the desktop, and the first thing it'll do is prompt you to put in your serial number, which was the number that you were sent in the email when you purchased Edius. So pop it in. If you bought an upgrade, after you've done this and clicked OK, it will then ask you to put in the serial number of whatever you're upgrading from. You've got to remember that if you're buying an upgrade, you need a license from the current version, Edius 11, and a license from whatever you upgraded from. So suppose you had Edius 10 on the system, well, you need an Edius 10 license as well as an Edius 11 license to be able to run Edius 11. Now, obviously, to run any version of Edius, you need a license for it. With Edius 10, you could activate it twice, so you could have that on 2 computers. Well, the net upshot is that you can't have your Edius 10 on 2 computers and an Edius 11 upgrade on a 3rd computer. You'd have to actually have one of those Edius 10 activations put into the Edius 11 machine. Of course, Edius 11 can only be activated on one machine at a time. You can deactivate it and then reactivate it twice in a week, so you can move it around a little bit, but if you want a second license, you have to buy that as a separate option. Obviously, another thing that hopefully you should be aware of before you bought Edius is that if you do upgrade from Edius 10 to Edius 11, you can't keep Edius 10 on the system. It will uninstall it for you. They don't coexist. You could keep Edius 9, but you can't keep Edius 10. So, having put in the serial number, it then prompts you to put in your Edius ID. A difference between Edius 11 and Edius 10 is that even with the workgroup version, you have to have an Edius ID. And you also have to go on the internet once a month to keep the license going. Now, this doesn't mean if you don't go on once a month, like you go off for a 2-month holiday and you come back, then you're stuffed because you've lost it completely. That's not the case. It just means that if you haven't used your system for a month, Edius won't work until you're on the internet. So after a 2-month holiday, you turn it on, goes on the internet, activates the license, and you carry on. You don't actually have to use it every single month. The broadcast version doesn't go on the internet, but then the broadcast version is only really intended for broadcasters. Now, for most people, it won't be a problem because their machine's probably on the internet. It'll do it all in the background and you won't even notice. But yeah, the changes from Edius 10 is that even the workgroup one needs to go on the internet once a month. So anyway, you pop in your Edius ID. It was always a good idea to have an Edius ID anyway, because it stores your serial numbers. And I've got a separate video on Edius IDs you can see on my website. And after you've done that, and assuming everything's gone in correctly, Edius activates and you're into the program itself. Now everything's installed, the next thing to do is to open Edius. In previous versions, when you'd first installed Edius, it would present you with a wizard to set up the project settings. It doesn't do that on this version because Edius already now comes with some project settings. The first thing you'll see is this, which is where do you want the default folder for projects to be. Obviously you can change this per folder anyway. I normally click on this and then I'm going to go to my D drive and make up a folder called Edius Projects and put all my projects in there. But of course you don't have to do that, you could decide to put them somewhere else. Click OK. And then you get to the standard new project box, and then here you click new project. Now this is where on a clean install of Edius 10 it would ask you what kind of projects you want and start a project wizard, which it doesn't do here. Here you just do this and it immediately takes it into this thing where you've got a whole bunch of pre-made settings in there already. The project wizard still exists, it's just in the settings. They're just trying to help you by getting started. These social media presets, for example, are typical ones you might use for doing things like square footage and so on. They're all set to 29.97, and I use PAL footage, so I'd prefer 25 or 50, and I can change that later, but you've just got all these pre-made ones here, and there's some video ones as well. Then all you got to do is give it a name. This thing up here saying project name is red because it used to actually fill in a project name and now it doesn't. But once you fill in a project name, it does the usual thing of creating a folder with that name, and all the other stuff here should be the same as before. So I'm just going to choose a project, click OK, and get into Edius proper. Now my Edius has spread itself out over 2 screens because I happen to have 2 screens on this computer. You could just only see one of them, but all the other stuff is on the other screen. I'm just going to bring it back on this one. And all this kind of stuff is exactly the same as before. You just pick things up and move them around until you've got some kind of setting that you like, and then save it. Now, if you are upgrading from a previous version of Edius, it will have taken all of your previous settings, so all of your effects settings and everything else. And all of this stuff will have already been arranged. You'll have your pre-made layouts and everything else in there. And it wouldn't have even taken you to that thing of where do you want to put your basic project folder. It would just take the settings from previous projects. Now, I mentioned that project wizard that we used to get in Edius 10 is still there. Just go up to Settings, System, Application, Project, and here we have the preset wizard. So if you want to use that to create project presets, that's still there. This is also where I can get into those projects and change them. So suppose I go to my social media project. I want to actually come in here and change that, where you think here I could come in and modify it and it doesn't do it. Actually you can't. These ones are preset and hardwired and not changeable, not modifiable. I could copy it, then open it up and then change it to a 25 frames a second preset, which would match most of my footage. With these tutorials I actually do it at 30 frames a second. I see no point in doing 29.97, but 30. That's what I do these screen grabs at, because most screens are running at 60, so it's nice to have some kind of multiple of that. So, yeah, I create a YouTube preset at that. You don't have to, but if you want to modify any of these, that's how you get at it. And also, obviously, you can create some presets here. In fact, I've already put some in, because it only starts off with a couple of high-def ones and a couple of 4K ones. Now, these presets always used to be saved in that user folder. So let's get me 11 user folder up. This is my user folder, so it's on the C drive under users, the username, which is me, app data, roaming, Grass Valley, Edius, and then under Edius you can see I've got a folder for 9 and a folder for 11. That is my user folder for 11. If you can't see this, it might be because the app data folder is hidden. As a default, that's something that Windows hides. I always make sure I can see it. And to see it, what you've got to do is go to these little dots here and choose Options. Under Options, you go to the View tab and you tick this thing, Show Hidden Files and Folders. In Windows 10, it's pretty similar. There's a folder options thing there. But it's that one, Show Hidden Files and Folders, then you'll be able to see the app data. They're hidden as a default because mainly they're folders you don't want to fiddle with. Now, in my case, I do, which is why I want to see them. But anyway, that's where your Edius user profile stuff is. Sometimes this gets corrupted, and I'll talk in a minute about what I would do if I'm getting some weird stuff going in Edius and I want to reset the user profile. But here, this is where normally the project presets will be saved. And here you are, there's a project presets folder. Now, you'll notice in there, you don't have these because they're stored somewhere else. If you put project presets in here, they will turn up in your projects list. But these ones are stored somewhere else. They're actually stored in the Grass Valley Edius folder. So it's Program Files, Grass Valley Edius Project Presets. And this is where your social media stuff is stored. So theoretically, I could just get rid of those and they would be disappeared. Now that I've deleted them, let's make up a new project. And yep, those ones have now disappeared. So you can get rid of them if you want to. They are write protected. There will be error messages coming up as you delete it, but you can delete them and then you can get rid of those 29.97 ones if you want to. I mean, I wouldn't bother, I'd just leave them there and put in other ones. So like here on my video side, I've put in some HD ones, which are ones I use quite a lot. I use 50p 1920 quite a lot. And here I've also changed things like the sampling method. I use Lanczos all the time and so on. The only real difference you've got between Edius 11 and previous versions is you have these social media things here, which I am going to bring back by getting them out of my recycling bin. So you have those social media presets and you have a couple of HD presets already for you. The other thing that might happen is when you open Edius, the Viz title template library will pop up in the middle of the screen here. This is a new window, which is just lots of pre-made titles for you so that you can nick and then change to use for yourself. Like one of the dynamic ones here is one of the ones I use all the time at the start of these videos. This window will probably pop up in front of everything else. You can just take it and dock it with other things, just like you can the bin and the source browser and Mink and everything else. Inside the system settings, I'd go to application and then playback, and I would up the buffer size. I've got 32 gig of RAM in here. I could probably get away with putting it on 8 gigabytes, which will just give me more of a buffer if I'm playing stuff back. I either tend to put it on 8 or 4, but I've got 32 gigs, so let's leave it on 8. And obviously there's lots and lots of other stuff in here that you can come and play with. The other things that you might look at are under hardware. You've got preview device, and in this system I happen to have a mini monitor. At the moment the mini monitor is not doing anything, so if I click on that, it'll now start outputting video through the mini monitor to the TV connected to the mini monitor. Now the mini monitor happens to be a thing that's only got HDMI and SDI out. And the sound will be travelling down the mini monitor cable as well. So now if I tick that, I won't hear anything out of my computer speakers. I normally like to use things like Intensity Pro 4Ks, where I've got some analog outputs I can route to some speakers, as well as what's coming out the HDMI. But with the mini monitor, no, I'd have to listen to it through the TV. But to get it working, you tick that. A little message actually did pop up when I ticked it saying that I can't output from this project. I'm using a mini monitor, a regular old-fashioned mini monitor, which could only do HD at 25 and 50i, and I'm in a 50p project, so it complained about that. That's the little tick box that turns off that warning. Or, because I've got the workgroup version, I can come down here and convert it so that I can output it, say, at 50i, even though I'm in a 50p project, I'll get something out the mini monitor. Again, all that stuff hasn't changed. Under device presets, you'll probably want to set up some capture presets for whatever your capture device is. This system's got a mini monitor in it, so I haven't got any way of capturing, but I have got videos on my website about setting up device presets, but this is where you'd set up like a capture preset for an Intensity Pro 4K. Obviously you can't set a preset in here for capturing off DV and HDV because Edius doesn't do that anymore, but you can if you've got a Blackmagic device. And obviously everything else in here is pretty much the same as it used to be, so under still images you can do things like deinterlacing stuff when you save stills and so on. Now obviously, as usual, there's a whole bunch of user settings, and I have been through these in previous videos. One of the things you might want to do is come in here and go to Other, and change your default titler to be Viz Title Express. I tend to do things like on backups of my projects, I'll tick this, go to Browse, and then tell it to use my OneDrive folder. So I've got a OneDrive thing which actually backs stuff up to the internet automatically. I only set it for backups because a backup of a project is done every time you save it, and it just makes a very small file, and I back it up, goes straight in there, and then it goes up onto the internet without me noticing. Just means that I've got a backup of the project somewhere else. It's not the clips, it's not very big, it doesn't take up much effort on the computer's part. It's not actually the clips, like I say, it's just the project, but at least I've got the project somewhere else, so if I have a backup of the media somewhere else and my computer dies, at least I can get it back from there. But I like to set that, you don't have to. All this other stuff, obviously these are exactly the same settings as we had in previous versions. The old file name up there, pretty irrelevant now, it doesn't stick a file name in. On the proxy mode, I don't automatically generate proxies, again, just a preference. I tend to set ripple mode and overwrite mode up, put the waveform on linear because I like those things. Another thing I tend to untick is this. Now this is something that was added for people that use programs like Avid, and it adds an extra little dotted line next to the cursor. So here you can see on the timeline, you've got the extra dotted line, and it's kind of telling you what frame you're actually seeing on screen, whereas the line where you cut stuff is the solid line. If you've been an Edius user for years, you probably don't like it, so just come back into the user settings and say untick that, and it'll go away. On the monitor here, this is where if you're using a full screen playback on a computer screen, you can decide which one it is. On screen display, obviously, again, all these are the same as before. And on the playback, I like to tick these. So some of these are already ticked, things like continue playback when trimming. I find when I'm doing tutorials, I can actually be watching video and trimming at the same time. I like to have that going. And then down here, you've got all the different buttons that you can pop on. And I tend to do things like I will go to the recorder. So that's the recorder on the right. So that's the right side of this. And I like to pop on that one, which plays the timeline at 1.5 speed. There we go. Where I can still hear it and I can still see it, but it plays it a bit quicker, especially useful if I'm doing these tutorials where I just wobble on for ages, but I want to quickly scan through it properly. On the timeline, I would tend to put in these two ones. These ones put a fade on the rubber band on the transparency track without you opening it up, so I like to bung in those. Again, I've talked about those quite a bit. And the other important one that I do put in is the toggle extend clips when applying transitions. Because the number of times people have asked me about, why isn't my transition going on there? Because you need to overlap them a bit, and this is what this sorts out. So again, talk about that a lot in different tutorials. So all this lot, pretty much the same. And like I said, if you've just upgraded from an old one, it's probably just brought over your old stuff as well. The new thing about installing Edius 11 compared to older ones is that you don't have a preset wizard at the start, and you've got to do things like activate Viz title. Anyway, that's gone through the basics of setting up Edius 11. In my second video, I'll look at some possible problems you might get when setting up Edius. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you get a notification of when that comes out. Visit my website www.dvctraining.co.uk for more information about Edius, and I'll see you next time.